They said it would never happen, that no one would dare strike in the heart of Iran's secret depths. But then the sky lit up. Precision missiles tore through the night, targeting what the world had whispered about for years, Iran's hidden nuclear sites. The world held its breath, expecting silence, collapse, surrender. But what followed was not fear. It was not panic. What rose from the rubble was something far more powerful. A nation stood, not broken, but stronger, more defiant than ever. Tonight, you will see the part of this story the world doesn't want to talk about. The part where power isn't measured by missiles, but by the unbreakable spirit of a people who will refuse to kneel. Stay with me, because once you hear this, you'll never see this conflict the same way again. The moment arrived like the strike of lightning on a quiet night. America, after years of watching, waiting, and calculating, launched a preemptive strike against Iran's hidden nuclear sites. For years, intelligence agencies had reported whispers of Iran's secret facilities buried deep beneath mountains and deserts, shielded from satellite eyes and foreign inspection. The global community speculated, debated, and worried about how far Iran's nuclear ambitions had progressed. Diplomatic talks rose and fell, sanctions tightened like a vice, and the shadow of confrontation loomed heavy over the Middle East. But diplomacy has its limits, and America, seeing what it called a window of opportunity, acted. The strike was surgical, precise, and meticulously planned. Advanced surveillance systems had spent years gathering data, mapping suspected underground complexes, following shipments, decoding communications. With stealth bombers, high-precision bunker-busting missiles, and cutting-edge cyber warfare, America moved under the cover of night, aiming to neutralize Iran's nuclear capabilities in one swift and decisive operation. In a matter of minutes, the ground shook, and columns of smoke began rising from carefully selected targets across Iran's landscape. The world woke up to images of explosions, flashes of fire, and satellite footage showing charred bunkers and collapsed underground structures. Official statements followed, each word chosen with care. American leaders declared the mission a success, claiming that they had dismantled Iran's most secretive and dangerous capabilities before they could become an irreversible threat to global security. The justification was simple: act now or face a greater danger later. They presented the strike as a necessary act of defense, a painful but essential step to prevent what they feared could become a nuclear-armed regional power beyond their control. But beneath the surface of these public statements lay a far more complex reality. This was not just a strike against physical structures. It was a calculated gamble to break Iran's resolve. The strike sought not only to destroy centrifuges and reactors, but to shatter the confidence of a nation that had stood defiant against Western pressure for decades. It was designed to send a message to both Iran and the world that no nation, no matter how determined, could withstand the might of American power when it chose to act. The stakes of this operation extended far beyond the physical destruction on Iranian soil. This was a move carefully weighed against international opinion, global alliances, and the unpredictable ripple effects that could follow. Would it serve as a deterrent, or would it spark a wider conflict? Would it weaken Iran's position, or would it ignite new flames of resistance and defiance across the Muslim world? America's strike was not only a military action. It was a high-stakes bet on reshaping the balance of power in a region long haunted by conflict and suspicion. And as the dust settled, one truth became clear. While America had struck first, the story was far from over. When the first reports of the American strike broke, the world watched closely, expecting panic and collapse within Iran. Yet what followed surprised many and terrified others. There was no collapse, no breakdown of order, no frantic leadership scrambling for cover. Instead, Iran responded with a calm defiance that spoke louder than any counterattack could have. From the highest levels of government down to the ordinary citizens in the streets, the message was clear and unified. We will not be broken. In Tehran, leaders stood before their people not with fear, but with determination, declaring that their resolve had only grown stronger in the face of this aggression. Their speeches carried a weight that resonated deeply with a population long accustomed to threats and hardship. The Iranian people themselves embodied a resilience forged over generations. This was not the first time foreign powers had tried to break their spirit. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran had endured waves of sanctions, diplomatic isolation, covert operations, and military threats. Each attempt to weaken the nation had instead taught its people how to endure, how to adapt, and how to stand tall under pressure. Rather than divide them, the American strike only strengthened their unity. The people of Iran understood that this was not just a military attack. It was an assault on their sovereignty, their dignity, and their right to chart their own future. In the days following the strike, Images circulated worldwide of massive gatherings in city squares. Flags waved defiantly, chants rang through the air, and millions stood together, not as victims, but as warriors of patience. This was not the defiance of recklessness, but the quiet power of a people who have learned that true strength lies in endurance. The leadership framed the attack as yet another chapter in a long story of Western aggression, a story that the Iranian people knew all too well. They spoke of resistance, not as an option, but as a duty. Not for revenge, but for honor. Iran's defiance was not rooted in mere nationalism, but in something far deeper. It was spiritual. Their faith teaches that patience in the face of oppression is a virtue, that enduring hardship with dignity brings reward, and that standing firm against injustice is a divine obligation. This spiritual foundation gave Iran a strength that military strategists often fail to calculate. They could destroy buildings, but they could not destroy conviction. They could target facilities, but they could not target belief. The defiance that rose from Iran was a message to the world that strength is not always measured by the size of one's arsenal, but by the depth of one's spirit. America may have struck the first blow, but Iran's immediate and unshaken response revealed a deeper kind of power, one rooted in history, faith, and the unbreakable will of its people. Long before America's recent strike, Iran had already been living under a constant siege of pressure from the international community. For decades, it has navigated an environment where sanctions have crippled its economy, restricted its access to global markets, and isolated it diplomatically. Yet through each wave of sanctions, Iran refused to fold. Instead, it developed an extraordinary capacity to adapt. The economic strangulation intended to bring Iran to its knees instead forced it to build domestic industries, create self-sufficient technological sectors, and foster a culture of innovation that allowed it to survive without the luxury of foreign support. Its leaders turned adversity into opportunity, using every hardship as a lesson in self-reliance. Assassinations of its scientists, including key figures in its nuclear program, were meant to dismantle Iran's progress. Yet for every expert lost, new generations stepped forward, often trained within Iran's own universities, carrying on the mission with even greater resolve. Cyber attacks designed to cripple Iran's infrastructure became opportunities to develop one of the most sophisticated cybersecurity and counter-cyber warfare operations in the region. Covert operations aiming to destabilize the country's leadership only solidified their hold on power, with internal threats swiftly neutralized and public support strengthened through narratives of national resistance. Iran's isolation on the world stage was not simply endured, but strategically reframed. The government painted Western hostility as evidence of Iran's independence and righteousness, building a national identity rooted in defiance against foreign domination. The sanctions became proof to many Iranians that their struggle was not just political, but moral and spiritual, casting their resilience as a form of resistance against oppression. The longer the world sought to isolate them, the stronger their internal bonds became. The people grew accustomed to hardship, but not hopeless. They adjusted to scarcity, but not surrender. The decades-long pressure created a society that could bend without breaking. Unlike many nations whose survival depends on foreign alliances and global trade, Iran built systems designed to withstand prolonged isolation. Domestic agriculture, energy independence through vast oil and gas reserves, and an internal market capable of sustaining its population allowed the country to function, even when cut off from much of the global economy. It developed intricate networks of regional alliances and non-traditional trade routes to bypass many of the sanctions imposed on it, strengthening ties with nations who shared its anti-Western stance or who valued its resources and strategic position. This long history of surviving sanctions, sabotage, and isolation has hardened Iran into something far more formidable than its adversaries anticipated. It is not simply a nation surviving under pressure, it is a nation thriving in defiance of that pressure. The strike on its nuclear sites did not catch Iran off guard, but rather unfolded against the backdrop of a people well accustomed to enduring external threats. The scars of the past have become the armor of the present, making Iran a uniquely resilient force in a world where many thought it would have already fallen. The moment America's strike on Iran's hidden nuclear sites was revealed to the world, its impact rippled far beyond the borders of Iran itself. Across the Muslim world, from North Africa to Southeast Asia, the echoes of the attack stirred deep emotions. For many, it was not simply seen as a targeted military action against one nation, but as a fresh reminder of a long pattern of intervention, aggression, and humiliation inflicted upon Muslim countries. In the streets of Cairo, Islamabad, Istanbul, Jakarta, and countless other cities, voices rose in protest, uniting under a shared sense of outrage and frustration. The strike was interpreted as yet another attempt by a global superpower to dictate terms to the Muslim world. Undermining sovereignty under the guise of global security. Throughout history, Muslim nations have seen one of their own fall victim to foreign interference time and time again. From the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan to the destruction in Libya and Syria, to the continuous occupation and struggle in Palestine, many Muslims have carried within them a growing sense of injustice. The strike against Iran reignited these wounds. It rekindled the collective memory of a century-long struggle marked by colonialism, exploitation, and manipulation by outside powers. The timing and precision of America's strike became a symbol of how the sovereignty of Muslim nations is still considered expendable in the pursuit of Western interests. As protests erupted, conversations began to shift across the Muslim world. Intellectuals, religious scholars, political leaders, and ordinary citizens found themselves asking the same urgent question: how long will we remain divided and vulnerable? For decades, divisions between Sunni and Shia, Arab and Persian, conservative and progressive, rich and poor, have kept the Muslim world fractured. These divisions have often been fueled and manipulated by foreign powers to prevent any serious collective strength from emerging. But the strike on Iran served as a stark reminder that, regardless of sectarian or political differences, the Muslim world shares a common vulnerability when foreign aggression strikes. Many saw Iran's defiance as a reflection of their own desire for dignity and independence. The attack became a rallying point, not necessarily because of political alignment with Iran's leadership, but because it symbolized a broader struggle against foreign dominance that transcends borders. The Muslim world, diverse as it is, recognized the deeper meaning behind the strike. When one stands alone, all remain exposed. The growing sense of unity was not based on ideology, but on survival. It was a call to set aside internal differences and recognize that the security, dignity, and future of the Muslim world could only be protected through collective strength. The world powers that once counted on these divisions to maintain control are now facing a new challenge. The strike intended to weaken Iran has instead stirred a conversation that threatens to awaken something much larger, a movement toward Muslim solidarity. A silent but growing realization is spreading that if the Muslim nations continue to stand apart, they will continue to be vulnerable. But if they stand together, they could form a force that even the most powerful nations cannot ignore or manipulate. Behind the military operations, the political statements, and the calculated strikes, there lies a deeper fear that drives much of the West's actions toward Iran. It is not only Iran's nuclear ambitions or its military capabilities that unsettle global superpowers. It is the growing possibility that Iran's defiance might inspire a much larger awakening across the Muslim world. For decades, Western powers have depended on a fragile system of division, where Muslim nations remain fractured along sectarian, ethnic, political, and economic lines. This division has allowed foreign powers to maintain influence, extract resources, and dictate terms across the region. But the sight of a Muslim nation standing tall under relentless pressure threatens to upend this long-standing arrangement. Iran's ability to withstand years of sanctions, assassination plots, cyber attacks, and now open military strikes sends a powerful message. It tells the world that a Muslim nation can refuse to be dependent, can resist foreign dictates, and can build its own path forward, even under the most severe external pressure. This example is not lost on other Muslim nations, many of whom have also experienced varying degrees of foreign interference and control. The fear in Western capitals is that Iran's endurance could serve as a blueprint, a spark that ignites a larger movement of Muslim nations seeking to reclaim their sovereignty, unite their interest, and challenge the dominance of Western global structures. The West has long relied on regional rivalries, arms sales, military bases, and political alliances to keep Muslim nations dependent and divided. The oil wealth of the Gulf, the political instability of North Africa, the sectarian conflicts in the Levant, all have served to keep the Muslim world fragmented, unable to unite under a common cause. But Iran's survival against immense odds raises the question, what if these nations began to see beyond their division? What if the lessons learned from Iran's defiance became the foundation for regional cooperation, economic independence, and mutual defense? Such a shift would not only threaten Western influence in the Middle East, but would alter global economic and political power dynamics. The Western fear is not purely military. It is also ideological. A united Muslim bloc that controls vast natural resources, sits on critical trade routes, and commands over 1 billion people would become a global force no longer easily manipulated. It would challenge financial systems, trade networks, and political alliances that have long been dominated by the West. The potential rise of independent Muslim media, educational institutions, scientific collaborations, and defense pacts would further erode the cultural and psychological control the West has exerted for generations. America's strike on Iran in this context is not merely about targeting nuclear facilities, but about sending a broader message that defiance will be met with force. Yet paradoxically, every act of aggression also risks fueling the very unity the West fears most. As the Muslim world watches Iran's endurance, many are beginning to ask whether it is finally time to set aside old differences and stand together. In that possibility lies a future that deeply unsettles the existing world order. As powerful as America's missiles may be, as sophisticated as its intelligence might appear, there remains one force that no technology can penetrate, no weapon can destroy, and no strategy can outmaneuver: the unbreakable faith of a people whose strength comes not from their arsenals, but from their hearts. This is the true power that sustains Iran's defiance, a spiritual resilience rooted deeply in their identity, history, and unwavering belief that their struggle is not just political, but sacred. For many in the West, calculations of power are measured in stockpiles, sanctions, alliances, and military capabilities. But for a people who see their trials as tests from God, every hardship becomes a form of purification, every loss a step toward greater strength, and every act of aggression an opportunity to reaffirm their conviction. Iran's history is saturated with waves of invasion, betrayal, and external manipulation. From ancient empires to colonial ambitions, from puppet regimes to modern sanctions, its people have endured an unrelenting series of external pressures. Yet, with every attempt to control or break them, they have discovered new reserves of patience, unity, and purpose. Their faith teaches that endurance in the face of oppression is not weakness, but honor, that the path of righteousness is often paved with sacrifice, and that true victory belongs not to those who dominate in the moment, but to those who remain steadfast through the storm. This unbreakable spiritual core also provides Iran with something its adversaries cannot fully understand or counter: the power of generational resilience. The youth of Iran, who have grown up knowing nothing but sanctions and threats, do not carry the mentality of victims. Instead, many of them inherit a legacy of defiance, molded by parents and grandparents who resisted foreign interference and survived economic war. They have learned to adapt, innovate, and build within the constraints imposed upon them, fostering a national character that values self-reliance, dignity, and perseverance. In this way, faith becomes not just a personal practice, but a national shield, a shared belief that their destiny is in the hands of a higher power, not foreign governments. This spiritual strength is also what makes Iran's defiance resonate so deeply across the broader Muslim world. Muslims globally see in Iran's resistance a reflection of their own longing for dignity, sovereignty, and justice. They understand that while bombs can level buildings, they cannot level belief. While sanctions can disrupt economies, they cannot disrupt a nation's will to survive and remain true to its identity. This is the fear that lingers in the hearts of those who seek to control the Muslim world, that one day more nations might discover that the greatest power they possess is not in their weapons or wealth, but in the unshakable spirit of a people who refuse to be broken. As long as that spirit burns, every strike against them becomes a reminder, not of weakness, but of strength that cannot be conquered. And so, while the world watches missiles fall and speeches echo in grand halls, something much deeper unfolds beneath the surface. America struck Iran's hidden nuclear sites, believing it could end a threat, crush a nation's will, and send a message to the world. But what they encountered was not just a military opponent. They faced a people anchored in something far stronger than weapons or politics. Iran did not collapse. It stood defiant, rooted in faith, bound by history, and strengthened by every trial it has endured. Across the Muslim world, eyes are opening, hearts are stirring, and an ancient truth is rising again: that true power does not lie in who strikes first, but in who refuses